Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carried the heavy bucket of cleaning supplies up the marble staircase. The mansion was bigger than any building she had ever worked in before. Crystal chandeliers hung from every ceiling, and expensive paintings covered the walls. She had been working here for 3 weeks now, and still felt like a small mouse in a palace. At 42 years old, Maria had cleaned houses for 20 years. She had worked for rich families, doctors, and lawyers. But this job was different. The man who hired her, Vincent Romano, was unlike any boss she had encountered before. He was always dressed in expensive suits, spoke in a quiet but commanding voice, and had men in black suits following him everywhere. Maria needed this job desperately. Her daughter Carmen was sick with cancer, and the hospital bills were crushing their family. Maria's husband had left them 2 years ago, and she was raising Carmen alone. The salary Mr. Romano offered was 3 times what she usually made. She could not afford to lose this opportunity, no matter how strange her new workplace seemed. The Romano mansion sat on a hill overlooking the city. It had 15 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a library, a wine cellar, and a gym. Maria was responsible for cleaning the main floors, but she was strictly told never to go into the basement or the 3rd floor. Mr. Romano's assistant, a thin man named Tony, had made this very clear on her first day. "You clean what we tell you to clean," Tony had said, his eyes cold and serious. "You don't ask questions. You don't talk to guests. You don't go where you're not supposed to go. Understand?" Maria had nodded quickly. She understood perfectly. She had worked for private people before who valued their privacy. She was good at being invisible, at doing her job without being noticed. That was exactly what rich people wanted from their cleaning staff. Every morning, Maria arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. She would enter through the back door using the key Tony had given her. The house was always quiet at that hour. Mr. Romano was usually still sleeping, and his security team was busy with their morning rounds outside the property. Maria's routine was simple and organized. She would start with the kitchen, making sure every surface sparkled. Then she would move to the living areas, dusting furniture and vacuuming carpets. The bathrooms came next, followed by the bedrooms that were in use. She worked efficiently and silently, like a ghost moving through the house. What Maria noticed right away was how many people came and went from the Romano house. During her 3 weeks there, she had seen dozens of different men in expensive suits arriving for meetings. They always looked serious, spoke in hushed voices, and carried briefcases or large envelopes. Some of them looked nervous, others appeared angry, and a few seemed scared. Maria also noticed that these meetings often took place in Mr. Romano's office, which was on the 2nd floor. The office had thick wooden doors and soundproof walls, but sometimes voices would carry into the hallway when the doors opened. Maria had heard raised voices, arguments, and even what sounded like threats. She tried not to listen, but it was impossible to completely ignore what was happening around her. One Tuesday morning, Maria was cleaning the 2nd floor hallway when she heard shouting coming from Mr. Romano's office. The voice was not Mr. Romano's calm tone, but someone else's, someone who sounded terrified. "Please, Mr. Romano, I just need more time," the voice pleaded. "My business is struggling, but I can get you the money. I swear on my children's lives." Maria tried to focus on her cleaning, but the conversation was getting louder. She could hear Mr. Romano's voice now, still calm but with an edge that made her skin crawl. "Mr. Peterson, you've had 6 months. 6 months to pay what you owe. My patience has limits." "I understand, but the economy is bad. My restaurant is barely making enough to pay the staff. If you give me just 2 more months..." "2 more months?" Mr. Romano's voice became colder. "Do you think this is a charity? Do you think I'm in the business of giving free loans?" Maria heard footsteps moving around the office, and then a new voice joined the conversation. It was Tony, Mr. Romano's assistant. "Boss, should I explain to Mr. Peterson what happens to people who don't pay their debts?" The pleading voice became more desperate. "No, please. I have a family. I have 3 young children. I'll find a way to get the money." "You should have thought about your family before you borrowed money from me," Mr. Romano said. "Tony, take Mr. Peterson to the basement. Help him understand the seriousness of his situation." Maria's blood ran cold. The basement was one of the areas she was forbidden to enter. She had always wondered what was down there, but now she was beginning to understand that she did not want to know. She quickly gathered her cleaning supplies and moved to a different part of the house. 20 minutes later, she saw Tony escorting a middle-aged man with tears in his eyes toward the back of the house. The man was limping and his shirt was torn. Maria pretended to be busy organizing a linen closet, but she watched through the corner of her eye as they disappeared down a hallway that led to the basement stairs. The man never came back up. That evening, Maria went home to her small apartment where Carmen was waiting for her. Her daughter was getting weaker every day, and the chemotherapy was making her constantly tired. Maria cooked dinner and helped Carmen with her homework. But her mind kept returning to what she had witnessed at the Romano house. She tried to convince herself that she had misunderstood the situation. Maybe Mr. Peterson had left through a different exit. Maybe the basement was just used for storage or business meetings. Maybe she was letting her imagination run wild because she watched too many crime shows on television. But deep down, Maria knew she had witnessed something terrible. She knew that Mr. Romano was not just a wealthy businessman. The expensive suits, the security team, the secret meetings, the threats, everything pointed to one conclusion that she did not want to accept. Her boss was involved in something illegal and dangerous. Over the next few days, Maria tried to act normal at work. She arrived on time, cleaned efficiently, and avoided making eye contact with Tony or any of the other men who worked for Mr. Romano. But she found herself paying closer attention to things she had previously ignored. She noticed that several rooms in the house had security cameras, but they were hidden and only visible if you knew where to look. She observed that certain guests never signed in at the front desk like others did. They came and went through side entrances. She saw that some of the men who worked for Mr. Romano carried guns under their jackets. Most importantly, she began to understand that her role as the invisible cleaning lady gave her access to information that could be very dangerous for Mr. Romano and his organization. One Thursday morning, Maria was cleaning Mr. Romano's office when she found a folder that had been left open on his desk. The folder contained photographs, documents, and what appeared to be police reports. Her hands shook as she looked at the papers, trying to understand what she was seeing. The documents were about missing people who had disappeared over the past few years. Some of the names she recognized from news reports she had seen on television. One photograph showed a young woman named Isabella Martinez, who had vanished 6 months ago. The police had been looking for her, and her family had been on the news, begging for information about her whereabouts. According to the documents in the folder, Isabella Martinez had owed money to Vincent Romano. Maria's heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. She quickly closed the folder and placed it back exactly where she had found it. Her hands were trembling as she continued cleaning the office, trying to act as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Maria now knew that her boss was not just involved in illegal business. He was connected to people's disappearances. People who crossed him, people who could not pay their debts, people who knew too much about his operations, people exactly like herself. As Maria finished cleaning the office, she realized that she was in terrible danger. She had seen and heard too much. She knew about the basement, about the missing people, about the violent methods Mr. Romano used to solve his problems. She was no longer just an invisible cleaning lady. She was a witness to crimes that could send Mr. Romano to prison for the rest of his life. The question was, what should she do with this information? Maria thought about her daughter Carmen, lying sick in their small apartment. Without this job, she could not afford Carmen's medical treatment. The insurance company had already denied several claims, and the doctors were pressuring her to pay the outstanding bills. If she lost this income, Carmen might die. But if she stayed, and Mr. Romano discovered that she knew his secrets, they might both die anyway. That evening, Maria sat beside Carmen's bed and watched her daughter sleep. Carmen's face was pale from the chemotherapy, but she looked peaceful. Maria brushed a strand of hair from Carmen's forehead and made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. She could not quit her job and let her daughter die, but she also could not pretend she had not seen what she had seen. There had to be another way. A way to use the information she had discovered to protect herself and Carmen while also bringing justice to the people Mr. Romano had hurt. Maria Santos, the maid nobody noticed, was about to become the most dangerous person in Vincent Romano's world. She just did not know it yet. The next morning, Maria returned to the Romano mansion with a small digital camera hidden in her cleaning supplies. If she was going to survive this situation, she needed evidence, real evidence that she could use to protect herself and her daughter. She was about to begin the most dangerous investigation of her life, armed with nothing but a mop, a bucket, and a mother's desperate love for her dying child. As she unlocked the back door of the mansion and stepped inside, Maria whispered a small prayer. She was walking into the lion's den, but she was no longer going to be invisible. Vincent Romano had made the mistake of underestimating the quiet woman who cleaned his house every day. It was a mistake that would cost him everything. Maria's hands were steady as she adjusted the tiny camera inside her cleaning cart. She had practiced using it dozens of times at home, making sure she could operate it without looking directly at it. The device was smaller than her thumb and could record both video and audio for up to 4 hours. 3 days had passed since she found the folder about missing people in Mr. Romano's office. During those 3 days, she had barely slept, constantly looking over her shoulder and jumping at every unexpected sound. But her fear was mixed with determination. Every time she looked at Carmen getting weaker in their small apartment, Maria knew she had to take this risk. Her plan was simple but dangerous. She would document everything she could about Mr. Romano's illegal activities. She would gather enough evidence to take to the police or the FBI. But she would also keep copies hidden in safe places, as insurance for her and Carmen's safety. Maria had learned about witness protection programs from television shows. If she could provide law enforcement with enough evidence to arrest Mr. Romano, they might relocate her and Carmen somewhere safe. Carmen could get her medical treatment in a new city, under new names, away from the reach of Mr. Romano's organization. It was a long shot, but it was the only plan she could think of that might save both their lives. On Friday morning, Maria arrived at the mansion earlier than usual. The security guards were used to her routine and barely looked up as she entered through the back door. She began her cleaning as normal, but now every movement was calculated. The camera was recording everything she saw and heard. The first breakthrough came when she was cleaning the second-floor hallway. Tony was on the phone in his office, and his door was slightly open. Maria positioned herself near the door, pretending to dust a picture frame while the camera captured his conversation. "Tell Marcello we got the payment from the restaurant owner," Tony was saying. Yeah. Peterson finally understood the message. He sold his car and borrowed money from his family. All 30,000 is here. Maria's stomach turned as she remembered the frightened man who had been taken to the basement earlier that week. Mr. Peterson had somehow found the money to pay his debt, probably by devastating his family's finances. "What about the girl from the nightclub?" Tony continued. "The one who was asking too many questions about Rodriguez's disappearance?" "Yeah, Maria Isabella Torres. She's been taken care of. The boss wants her car dumped in the river tonight, make it look like an accident." The camera captured every word as Maria fought to control her breathing. Another person was missing, probably dead, because they had gotten too close to Mr. Romano's secrets. just like she was doing right now. Tony's conversation ended, and Maria quickly moved to a different area of the house. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. But she had gotten crucial evidence. Tony had just confessed to involvement in murder and discussed destroying evidence. Over the next 2 hours, Maria managed to record 3 more incriminating conversations. She learned that Mr. Romano's organization was involved in money laundering through several legitimate businesses around the city. They were also running an illegal gambling operation and were connected to a drug distribution network. But the most shocking discovery came when she was cleaning near Mr. Romano's private study. The door to the study was usually locked, but Maria saw that it had been left slightly open. Through the gap, she could see Mr. Romano meeting with someone she recognized from television, City Councilman Robert Hayes. Councilman Hayes was known for his anti-crime campaigns and had recently been elected on a platform of cleaning up corruption in the city government. Maria positioned herself where she could record their conversation through the open door. "The police raid on the docks next week needs to be called off," Mr. Romano was saying. "My shipment is arriving Tuesday night. Your people in the department need to make sure there are no surprises." Councilman Hayes looked uncomfortable, but nodded. "It's getting harder to control the investigation. Detective Morrison is asking too many questions about the missing persons cases. She's connecting dots that we don't want connected." "Then maybe Detective Morrison needs to have an accident," Mr. Romano suggested casually. "Vincent, please, I can't be involved in anything like that. I'll find another way to redirect her investigation." "You'll do whatever I tell you to do, Robert. Don't forget that I have very detailed records of every payment you've received from my organization over the past 3 years. If I go down, you go down." Maria's camera captured the entire exchange. She now had evidence that corruption in the city government went all the way up to elected officials. Councilman Hayes was on Mr. Romano's payroll, and they were planning to interfere with a police investigation. As she moved away from the study, Maria realized that the situation was even more dangerous than she had thought. If Mr. Romano had people inside the police department and city government, going to the authorities might be signing her death warrant. She needed a different plan. That afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen, Maria overheard a conversation between 2 of Mr. Romano's security guards that chilled her blood. "Did you hear about the new cleaning lady?" one guard said to the other. "Tony's been asking questions about her background check." "What kind of questions?" "He wants to know why her references were so hard to verify, and he's wondering why someone with her qualifications would take a job way out here for only 3 weeks of work." Maria's hands froze as she wiped down the counter. They were investigating her. Somehow Tony had become suspicious about her presence in the house. "You think she's a problem?" the second guard asked. "I think Tony doesn't like loose ends. And he definitely doesn't like people who might be paying too much attention to things they shouldn't see." The guards moved away, but Maria had heard enough. Her time was running out. If Tony was investigating her background, it would only be a matter of time before they discovered something that made them suspicious. Or worse, they might decide to eliminate the potential threat she represented. Maria finished her shift as quickly as possible and left the mansion. During the drive home, she noticed a black car following her. When she turned left, it turned left. When she stopped at a red light, it stopped behind her. Her mouth went dry with fear. Instead of driving straight home to Carmen, Maria drove to a busy shopping mall. She parked near the main entrance and quickly walked inside, mixing with the crowd of shoppers. After waiting 20 minutes and watching through the windows, she saw the black car drive away. They had been watching her, testing her, trying to see if she would lead them to something or someone important. Maria took a bus home instead of using her car, getting off 2 stops before her apartment building and walking the rest of the way. She climbed the stairs to her apartment with shaking legs, constantly looking over her shoulder. Carmen was asleep when she arrived home, exhausted from another day of chemotherapy. Maria sat beside her daughter's bed and watched her breathe, knowing that everything she was doing was for this moment, to keep Carmen alive and safe. That evening, Maria made copies of all the evidence she had collected. She burned one set onto a DVD, uploaded another to a secret email account, and saved a third copy on a flash drive that she hid inside a bag of rice in her kitchen. If something happened to her, she wanted to make sure the evidence would still be found. She also wrote a detailed letter explaining everything she had discovered about Vincent Romano's organization. The letter included names, dates, locations, and descriptions of all the criminal activities she had witnessed. She sealed the letter in an envelope addressed to the FBI and hid it with one set of the recordings. But Maria's biggest challenge was still ahead of her. She needed to get more evidence from the forbidden areas of the house, specifically the basement where she suspected Mr. Romano kept his most dangerous secrets. On Monday morning, Maria returned to work with a new plan. She had studied the layout of the house and the schedules of the security guards. There was a 15-minute window every morning when the guards changed shifts, and the basement was left unmonitored. She would have exactly 15 minutes to get downstairs, document whatever was there, and get back to the main floor before anyone noticed she was missing. At 9:30 in the morning, Maria made her move. She grabbed a mop and bucket as cover and slipped downstairs while the guards were distracted by their shift change. The basement was darker than she expected, lit only by a few overhead bulbs. What she found there would haunt her for the rest of her life. The basement was divided into several rooms. The first room contained filing cabinets filled with documents about Mr. Romano's illegal businesses. The second room had computer equipment and stacks of cash in various currencies. But it was the third room that made Maria's blood turn to ice. The room contained several large plastic containers, industrial-strength cleaning chemicals, and tools that had no purpose in any legitimate business. The smell in the room was terrible, a mixture of bleach and something organic and rotting. Maria's camera recorded everything as she forced herself to document the scene. She found a ledger book that contained a list of names, dates, and amounts of money. Many of the names matched the missing persons reports she had seen in Mr. Romano's office. In the final room, Maria discovered what appeared to be a makeshift prison cell. The room had no windows, a heavy steel door with multiple locks, and chains bolted to the walls. There were bloodstains on the concrete floor that looked recent. Maria had found Mr. Romano's torture and disposal facility. She took pictures and video of everything, fighting back waves of nausea as she realized what had happened in these rooms. This was where people who crossed Mr. Romano disappeared forever. This was where they brought people like Mr. Peterson when threats were not enough. As she was finishing her documentation, Maria heard footsteps upstairs. Her 15 minutes were up, and someone was looking for her. She quickly turned off the camera and grabbed her cleaning supplies. "Maria, where are you?" Tony's voice echoed from the main floor. "I'm here, Mr. Tony," she called back, climbing the stairs as quickly as she could. "I was cleaning the basement bathroom like you asked me to do last week." Tony looked at her suspiciously. "I never asked you to clean anything in the basement." Maria's heart stopped, but she forced herself to look confused. "I'm sorry. I thought you did. Maybe I misunderstood. My English is not always perfect." She held her breath as Tony stared at her, clearly trying to decide whether to believe her story. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Stay upstairs from now on. The basement is off limits. I thought I made that clear when you started working here." "Yes, Mr. Tony, I understand. No more basement." As Tony walked away, Maria realized how close she had come to disaster. One wrong word, one suspicious detail, and she would have ended up in one of those basement rooms herself. But she now had evidence that could destroy Vincent Romano's entire organization. She had recordings of conversations about murder, corruption, money laundering, and drug trafficking. She had photographs of the disposal facility in the basement. She had documentation that connected missing persons to Mr. Romano's organization. The question was, what should she do with it? That evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table and stared at the flash drives and DVDs containing the evidence she had risked her life to gather. She could take it to the FBI and hope that there were honest agents who were not on Mr. Romano's payroll. She could send copies to news reporters and hope they would investigate the story. She could try to contact the families of the missing people and let them know what had happened to their loved ones. But every option seemed to lead to the same conclusion. Once this evidence became public, Vincent Romano would know exactly who had betrayed him. The cleaning lady who had access to his house, who had been in the right place at the right time to gather this information, who had disappeared at the exact moment the evidence surfaced. Maria Santos would become the most wanted woman in the city, with a crime organization hunting her and her sick daughter. As she looked at Carmen sleeping peacefully in the next room, Maria realized that gathering the evidence was only the beginning. The real challenge was going to be staying alive long enough to make sure the right people saw it. She was holding information that could bring down a powerful crime boss and expose corruption throughout the city government. But she was just one woman with no protection, no resources, and no allies. Vincent Romano had built his empire by eliminating threats. Now Maria had made herself the biggest threat he had ever faced. The war between the invisible cleaning lady and the mafia boss was about to begin. Maria didn't sleep at all Tuesday night. She sat at her kitchen window, watching the street below for any sign of black cars or unfamiliar faces. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every sound made her jump. Carmen had noticed her mother's nervousness and kept asking if everything was okay. "I'm fine, mija," Maria had told her daughter. "Just worried about work. Nothing for you to worry about." But everything was wrong, and Maria knew her time was running out. On Wednesday morning, Maria arrived at the Romano mansion to find the atmosphere completely changed. There were twice as many security guards as usual, and everyone seemed tense and alert. Tony met her at the back door instead of letting her enter normally. "Maria, we need to talk," he said, his voice more serious than she had ever heard it. Her blood turned cold, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Of course, Mr. Tony. Is there a problem with my work?" "Come with me." Tony led her to a small office she had never been in before. Two large men in dark suits were waiting inside. Maria recognized one of them as Mr. Romano's head of security, a man named Frank who never spoke, but always watched everything with cold, calculating eyes. "Sit down," Tony commanded. Maria sat in the chair across from Tony's desk, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. The camera was in her cleaning cart outside the office, but she was wearing a small digital recorder that she had sewn into the lining of her uniform. "Maria, we've been reviewing your employment file," Tony began. "There are some inconsistencies in your background check that concern us." "I don't understand," Maria replied, though her heart was pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it. "Your previous employer, Mrs. Henderson, says you never worked for her. The cleaning company you listed as a reference went out of business 6 months before you claimed to work there, and your address doesn't match what you put on your application." Each word hit Maria like a physical blow. They had discovered that parts of her resume were false. She had lied about some of her work history to make herself seem more qualified for the high-paying position. It was a small deception that millions of job applicants made every day, but in this context, it made her look like a spy or an undercover investigator. I can explain," Maria stammered. "Sometimes people don't remember, or maybe they got confused about dates. I have worked many cleaning jobs over the years." Tony leaned forward, his eyes never leaving her face. "Maria, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Are you working for law enforcement? Are you FBI? Police? Any kind of government agency?" "No," Maria said immediately. No, I am not police. I am not FBI. I am just a cleaning lady who needs this job to pay for my daughter's medical treatment. The mention of Carmen was calculated. Maria hoped that talking about her sick child would make her seem more sympathetic and less threatening. But Frank, the security chief, stepped forward with a folder in his hands. Then, explain this, he said, placing several photographs on the desk in front of her. Maria's world collapsed as she looked at the pictures. They showed her at various locations around the city over the past week. At the electronics store where she had bought the camera, at the internet cafe where she had created the secret email account, at the copy shop where she had made backups of her evidence. They had been following her, watching her, documenting her activities. These photos show you purchasing surveillance equipment and making copies of unknown materials, Frank said. That's not the behavior of a simple cleaning lady. Maria's mind raced, trying to think of an explanation that might save her life. I was making copies of Carmen's medical records for insurance. And I bought a camera to take pictures of her for the hospital. They said family photos help patients feel better during treatment. It was a weak story, but it was all she could think of. Tony and Frank exchanged glances, clearly not convinced. Stand up, Frank commanded. Maria stood slowly, her legs shaking. Frank stepped behind her and began patting her down, searching for weapons or recording devices. His hands found the small digital recorder sewn into her uniform. Well, 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 he said, pulling out the device. What do we have here? I don't know what that is, Maria said desperately. Maybe it fell into my uniform from somewhere in the house. Maybe it belongs to someone else. But even as she said it, Maria knew the game was over. They had caught her with surveillance equipment. They had proof that she had been lying about her background, and now they had found the recording device she was using to document their crimes. Frank pressed the playback button on the recorder. Tony's voice filled the room, playing back parts of the conversation that had just taken place. The evidence was undeniable. Maria Santos, Tony said, standing up from behind his desk. You are either the stupidest cleaning lady in the world or you're the bravest. Either way, you've seen things you shouldn't have seen and heard things you shouldn't have heard. Please, Maria said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I have a sick daughter. She will die if I don't have money for her treatment. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, I just needed this job. Take her to the basement, Frank said. We'll let Mr. Romano decide what to do with her. As Frank and the other security guard moved toward her, Maria made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of pleading or crying or trying to run, she stood up straight and looked Tony directly in the eyes. Before you do anything to me, you should know that I've already sent everything to the FBI. The room went silent. Tony's face went pale, and Frank stopped walking. What are you talking about? Tony asked. I've been recording conversations in this house for the past week, Maria said, her voice growing stronger as she realized she had nothing left to lose. I have videos from the basement showing the torture room and the disposal equipment. I have recordings of Mr. Romano discussing murders with Councilman Hayes. I have photographs of documents listing missing people who owed him money. She paused, watching their faces as the implications of what she was saying sank in. All of that evidence has been copied and sent to FBI agent Sarah Chen at the federal building downtown. If I don't call her by 6 o'clock tonight to confirm that I'm safe, she has instructions to immediately begin raids on this property and all of Mr. Romano's business locations. It was a complete bluff. Maria had never contacted the FBI, and she had no idea if Agent Sarah Chen even existed. But the look of panic on Tony's face told her that her lie was working. You're lying, Frank said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Maria asked. Do you really want to take that chance? How long do you think it will take the FBI to tear this house apart once they start looking? How long before they find the basement? How long before they match the DNA evidence down there to all those missing persons cases? Tony was now visibly sweating. He grabbed his cell phone and dialed a number. "Boss, we need you down here immediately," he said. "We have a situation with the cleaning lady." 5 minutes later, Vincent Romano entered the office. He looked at Maria with the same cold expression she had seen him use when threatening Mr. Peterson. But she was no longer the frightened cleaning lady who had started working here a month ago. She was a mother fighting for her daughter's life, and she had nothing left to lose. "Miss Santos," Mr. Romano said, his voice calm and controlled, "I understand you've been taking a very active interest in my business affairs." "Mr. Romano, I understand you've been murdering people," Maria replied. Frank started to move toward her again, but Mr. Romano held up his hand to stop him. "That's a very serious accusation," Mr. Romano said. "Do you have any proof of these claims?" "Yes," Maria said, "and that proof is currently in the hands of federal law enforcement. If anything happens to me, it gets released to every news station in the city and posted on the internet for the world to see." Mr. Romano studied her face carefully, trying to determine if she was telling the truth. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want safe passage for me and my daughter out of this city. I want enough money to pay for Carmen's medical treatment. And I want your guarantee that you will never come after us. And in exchange? In exchange, I keep quiet about what I've seen here. I take my daughter somewhere far away, and I never speak about Vincent Romano or anything that happens in this house." It was another lie. Maria had no intention of staying quiet about the murders and corruption she had uncovered, but she needed to get out of this room alive, and this was the only card she had to play. Mr. Romano was quiet for a long moment, thinking through his options. Finally, he spoke. "How do I know you won't go to the authorities anyway, even if I agree to your terms?" "How do I know you won't kill me the minute I walk out of here?" Maria replied. "I guess we'll both have to take some risks." Mr. Romano smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "You know, Miss Santos, I have to admit that I underestimated you. Most people who find themselves in your situation are begging for their lives by now." "I did beg for my life," Maria said. "Every day for the past 6 months, watching my daughter get sicker while I couldn't afford proper treatment for her. You offered me a job that could save her life, and I took it. Everything that happened after that was your choice, not mine." Another long silence filled the room. Maria could hear her heart beating and wondered if this would be the last conversation she would ever have. "Tony," Mr. Romano said finally, "give Miss Santos $50,000 from the safe upstairs and arrange for a car to take her wherever she wants to go." Tony looked shocked. "Boss, are you sure? What if she what, Tony? What if she keeps evidence that could destroy our organization? She already has that evidence. The only question now is whether she uses it." Mr. Romano turned back to Maria. "Miss Santos, you have impressed me today. Against my better judgment, I'm going to let you leave here alive. But understand this. If you ever contact law enforcement, if you ever speak to reporters, if you ever do anything to threaten my organization, I will find you and your daughter no matter where you go." "I understand," Maria said. "I hope you do. Because there are people in this world who are much more dangerous than a sick little girl and her mother. Don't make the mistake of thinking you've won some kind of victory here today." 20 minutes later, Maria was sitting in the back of a black sedan with a duffel bag containing $50,000 in cash. The driver, one of Mr. Romano's security team, was taking her home to collect Carmen and their belongings. As they drove through the city, Maria realized that her plan had worked better than she could have hoped. She was alive. She had enough money to pay for Carmen's treatment, and she was about to disappear with her daughter to start a new life somewhere safe. But she also knew that Vincent Romano was wrong about one thing. She had already won her victory. Before leaving the Romano mansion, Maria had hidden a copy of all her evidence in a location where it would eventually be found by law enforcement. She had also sent detailed letters to 3 different news reporters with instructions that they would only be opened if something happened to her. More importantly, Maria had realized during her confrontation with Mr. Romano that he had made a crucial mistake. He had assumed that she was working alone, that she was just a desperate mother who had stumbled onto his secrets by accident. He had no idea that Maria had grown up in a family of immigrants who had learned to survive by building networks of trust and mutual protection. Her cousin Diego worked as a security guard at the federal building downtown. Her neighbor Mrs. Chen was actually a retired police detective. Her daughter's doctor at the hospital was married to an investigative journalist at the city newspaper. Over the past month, Maria had carefully shared pieces of her story with each of these people. None of them had the complete picture, but together, they formed a safety net that would ensure the truth about Vincent Romano would come out no matter what happened to her. 6 months later, Maria and Carmen were living in a small apartment in Seattle, where Carmen was responding well to treatment at a world-class cancer center. They had new names, new identities, and new lives, far from the dangers of Vincent Romano's world. But every evening, Maria would check the news websites to read about the federal investigation that was slowly dismantling Vincent Romano's criminal organization. One by one, his associates were being arrested. His legitimate businesses were being seized. His corrupt contacts in the city government were being exposed. Vincent Romano himself was currently in federal custody, awaiting trial on charges that included racketeering, money laundering, and murder. The investigation had begun when an anonymous package containing hours of video and audio recordings was delivered to the FBI field office. The package also included a detailed letter from someone who identified herself only as a witness who wants justice for the families of missing people. Maria smiled as she read the latest update about the case. Carmen was getting stronger every day, and they were both safe in their new home. She had kept her promise to never speak publicly about her experiences in the Romano house, but she had never promised not to make sure that the evidence she had gathered would find its way to the right people. Vincent Romano had been right about one thing, though. Maria Santos was much more dangerous than he had imagined. She was a mother protecting her child, and there was no force in the world more determined or resourceful. The maid no one noticed had brought down one of the most powerful crime bosses in the city, and now she was just another anonymous face in the crowd, living quietly with her daughter and watching justice unfold from a safe distance. Sometimes the most invisible people are the ones with the most power to change the world. They just have to be brave enough to use it. Maria had been brave enough, and Carmen was alive because of it. That was the only victory that really mattered.